every hour. The able seaman duly plotted the position of the chart, which placed the ship at its alter course position. He did not feel that it was his place to suggest to the officer of the watch that he should alter course. Now, when the officer of the watch did return more than 15 minutes later, he checked the earlier position and told the able seaman that he had made a mistake in plotting the position. Shortly after, the ship took the ground. Now, the ship had been travelling towards a featureless horizon with no visual cues to mark the reef, which was largely submerged. And although the real cause of the grounding was through the inattentiveness of the officer of the watch, the report of the investigation suggests that had there been something such as a beacon to mark the reef, it may have stimulated the mate from his reverie so that he may have reacted to save the situation. But the report also adds that if the officer of the watch was conducting himself properly, such a consideration should not be necessary. But of course, he wasn't. Now let's fast forward to two incidents that occurred in 2008. Firstly, the case of the grounding of the LT Cortesia on the 2nd of January 2008 on the Van Bank in the English Channel. Now the ship was set to pass, set on a course to pass south of the Van Bank. And in short, the lookout had reported the light from the Van lightship. That was good news. But he also reported an object crossing into the fairway from the port side. The officer of the watch planned a starboard evasion manoeuvre, which took the ship between the east and west cardinal buoys marking the Van Bank, which he interpreted as moving fishing vessels. Now, while approaching the bank, approximately 15 to 20 different acoustic signals were heard, which the officer of the watch interpreted as a problem with the engine system. It went unnoticed for some time that the ship was aground. Now, ultimately, the ship ran aground as a result of inadequate voyage management system skills on the part of the officer of the watch and resultant incorrect settings, particularly in relation to depth contours, chart alarms, and the depth alarm settings, and errors of judgment in disregarding conventional navigation. Now, the report concludes that errors made by the officer of the watch in the handling of the voyage management system and the interpretation of the chart display could have been avoided with navigational due diligence. And the report assumes that during his bridge watch, he navigated solely according to the computer. And finally, the bulk carrier Federal Kivalana, which ran aground on the 6th of October 2008 in Norwegian waters, and this is a very new report. Now, the loss of navigational control began before the pilot came on board, since the bridge team did not then have the appropriate navigational charts and therefore didn't have a passage plan. No satisfactory exchange of information took place between the pilot and the bridge team concerning the passage plan, nor did the bridge team familiarise themselves with the passage plan even though the necessary charts had come on board with the pilot. Once the course had been set towards the beacon, shown here, the pilot was occupied with clarifying the wind conditions at the loading jetty, and this turned his attention away from navigating in the last 15 minutes prior to the grounding. Meanwhile, the master had become preoccupied with resetting the AIS, which wasn't functioning properly. Now, the result was that the ship continued on a steady course towards the beacon, and when it was about 2 miles from the beacon, the officer of the watch observed on the radar that the ship was heading towards land. He was not familiar with the pilot's passage plan, but from experience he knew that the pilot often followed a passage plan which took them near land. So he didn't consider the situation to be dangerous. A few minutes later, he observed from the radar that the ship was going straight towards land and the distance from it was about 300 metres. Surprise, surprise, the bridge team didn't react soon enough to complete a successful evasive manoeuvre, and the ship ran aground at a speed of 12 knots. Now, the causes of this grounding were put down to insufficient voyage preparation and deficiencies in bridge team management. In fact, the bridge team did not participate in navigation once the pilot came onto the bridge. And the result of this was that the only person involved in navigation was the pilot, and his attention had been diverted. Now, I've deliberately chosen these 4 case studies because through them we can identify some of the causal factors that I referred to earlier. But also, each one of them could have been avoided through the proper use of visual cues such as aids to navigation. Ladies and gentlemen, I repeat that marine safety investigations don't seek to apportion blame or determine liability. Instead, a marine safety investigation is one which is conducted with the objective of preventing marine casualties and marine incidents in the future. In other words, through these reports, all of those who are involved in the design, operation and support of ships and their systems should learn from the mistakes of others. However, it would seem that not all of the industry is heeding the lessons from these investigations. So what do we do about the bridge officer who fails to look out of the window? Well, short of the blinding flash of light or a loud oral signal to attract attention to a hazard, perhaps we need to redesignate fog signals as hazard warning signals. There is one simple aid that equipment manufacturers can provide for us. It is so simple that I cannot understand why they've not yet introduced it. It's a simple message, and you heard it yesterday from Michael Gray. A simple message which every few minutes flashes up on every screen on the bridge with the words, "Now look out of the window." Thank you. Michael, that's one for you.
David, thank you very much. So that concludes the 5 presentations in this first session. We have almost spot on time, a few minutes for questions. I hope you're ready. Who would like to ask the first question of one of these speakers? You have the option of charming young ladies with microphones available to you. Terry wants to ask a question of you. Terry?
Am I on?
Yes.
I said I'd make a connection between this hat and the subject I talk about. And having heard all the speakers, I think this is a very appropriate time. Football fever has already reached South Africa, and football fever is about to hit the whole world. Every country in the world, and millions of people would be looking and be interested in the World Cup. Now, I know there are a lot of VTS centres with television screens. I also know there are a lot of ships with television screens on the bridge. And distraction is one of the biggest causes of incidents. We've already heard from my fellow speakers this morning where people have been distracted and haven't noticed what's going on. The ship's run aground or hit something else or collided with a fixed object. So be warned, World Cup fever, I hope, is not going to cause any more accidents. But that is the connection between this hat and this very important subject. And incidentally, for those that think that I haven't washed this morning, I have. This is a repaint.
This is aged. Questions, come on. I saw a hand move just before Terry spoke. Yes, Seamus. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. My question initially was sparked by Nick's presentation, but I think perhaps the views of any of the speakers will be of use. Much of what is said indicates that the cause of accidents is very often the human error. So what is the role for automation? I'm conscious of the fact that, say, in very difficult conditions with aircraft, a Cat 3 landing can take an aircraft onto the ground fully automatically. Are we prepared to take a similar approach with shipping? Are we prepared to take shipping